Hi everyone, it's Cullen here with a quick programming note for this week's episode. This episode was recorded live from a boat. We were lucky enough to be on the JoCo Cruise 2020, which is kind of like a big floating nerd boat. And we got to do a live episode of the AniMonday podcast there from the Explorer's Lounge. It was a really fun time, and we were so distracted that we kind of forgot to start the recording right away. So this week's episode, of course, is on Kaguya-sama, Love is War. And so basically all that we're missing is Kayla and I introducing ourselves and introducing the concept of the show. We hope you enjoyed this live episode, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Thanks. I'm going to hit the record button. That would be nice.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we'll fill that in later. Love is War started as a manga series in 2015, and it has 17 volumes so far, and it's still ongoing. As of December of 2019, the manga had over 9 million copies in print, which for Japan is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's quite a few. There are also a couple of spin-off manga series based on Kaguya-sama. And the anime adaptation of this property, which is what we watched, is fairly recent. It aired in January of 2019, and Season 1 wrapped up just about this time last year. So as of last week, they actually announced Season 2 is coming in April, so next month. You can look forward to more of this. Finally, and this happens more often than you would think, there was a live-action adaptation of this brand new anime series that premiered in September of 2019. I have no word on if that's any good.
No, I haven't looked
They're
into
usually
it.
not. We watched the first 4 episodes, and we'll try to avoid major spoilers. This one's pretty straightforward, so I don't think we'll have any issues with that, but we'll be talking about those first 4. Kayla, would you like to give us a synopsis?
Everyone agrees that high school president Miyuki Shirogane and vice president Kaguya Shinomiya would make a perfect couple. But when it comes to the battlefield of love, confessing your feelings puts you at a clear disadvantage. Who will come out the winner in this game of love and pride?
Alright, so with Kaguya-sama, Love is War, so far we've only encountered really 3 characters. There's also almost no through plot line.
No, each episode is broken up into 3 short vignettes that some short little event happens, usually some internal battle between the 2 of them, and then that kind of ends, the next one starts.
Yeah, and that kind of explains why when we rolled the show previously, you had to read 3 very different long titles.
Yes, it was awful.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, the show kind of just gives you a basic setup and then blast right on through. There's an immediate 6-month time skip at the very beginning of the show.
Yeah, it seems like they go like, hey, we heard this rumor that we're dating. 6 months later, now we'll get started and actually hang out.
And as far as that kind of initial setup for the show, it's pretty kind of cliche anime stuff, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. But in a good way.
Sure. Let's check this off. Okay. Student council president and vice president. High school kids. Rich kids at an elite school called Shushin Academy. These people are super popular and very good at academics.
And everything.
And they're beautiful and popular. So that's a lot of anime.
Yeah.
That's most of it. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of our 2 main characters?
Yeah, so Miyuki is the high school president, and he is really reserved and kind of intense. So a lot of what you hear in the background about this character is that he's the number 1 in the class, or even in the school, maybe. He's really popular, and he seems overly concerned with people looking down on him. I don't know if that's because he doesn't come from wealth, or maybe less wealth than Kaguya, but he he frequently is concerned that she's gonna, look down at him and be like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah, he's actually kind of a little bit of a different type to go to this school. Most of the other people do come from powerful, wealthy families in this show. And so the only reason really that he has been put into the president position is because he is super good at school. And kind of the contrast to that is Kaguya, the titular character. What we're talking about with Kaguya is kind of an indication of how over the top this show is, because the very first thing we learn about her is that her family is worth 200 trillion yen, which is equivalent to about 1.8 trillion USD.
Which doesn't exist.
That's not a thing. So immediately, right off the bat, you're seeing like these characters who are over-exaggerated in every kind of conceivable way.
Yeah, and it seems like with Kaguya, she's won every award possible. Mm-hmm. Like, part of their background on her is the screen just starts filling up with all of her awards until the whole screen is overtaken by everything that she's done, which is, athletics and school and, just everything.
Right. I think kind of the most interesting thing, though, because the characters themselves are pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot of meat there, but I think what we've seen in the show is that the connection between them two is kind of like its own thing.
Yeah, I would say it's its own separate kind of entity in and of itself. And I think that's because we don't see them outside of this room. So they're always in the student council room, and we very rarely see them do anything outside that space, but we know that they have lives because, he's the top student in the school, so he has to be studying, he has to be going to class, he has to be doing well, but we don't see that. And same with Kaguya, she, is very successful in all the athletics that she does, and she's really popular, but we don't see any of that. Mm-hmm. Everything that we see happens in this room with just the two of them. So the focus is really on their relationship. Right.
And kind of because of their relationship being so tied to that student council president, vice president relationship, everyone else at the school just kind of assumes that they're together, even though there's no direct indication of that, and
Except for maybe the third character in this show, which is Chika.
Yes.
I can't tell if she's just completely oblivious to the fact that these two maybe are into each other. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Or if she just doesn't care, and she's just like, these are my friends, and they're also on the student council with me, so we're just going to hang out and have good times.
Yeah, Chika to me is kind of the relatable character, which is weird to say because she is kind of the stereotype anime person, especially in her appearance and her behavior is very anime, over the top.
Yeah, she's really playful.
But I think what Chika does really well for this relationship between Kaguya and Miyuki is that because Miyuki doesn't have some of the same family background that the other characters do, he can be pretty unrelatable to the rest of them. And Chika, despite her family also being wealthy and powerful, does not have the mannerisms of someone like Kaguya.
No, she seems to be like a social chameleon. She can get along with just about anyone and doesn't really seem to care, if they come from wealth or not. She's just there to enjoy people.
I see her as kind of like an in-between between the two characters of being relatable to Miyuki, but also having knowledge of wealth and power and all of that stuff.
And I think she's so important for this show because she isn't trying to get them together or keep them apart or anything. She's just kind of there to lighten up some of the intensity between the two of them. Right. Because she, like I said, she's very playful, and she is a lot of the humor in the show. Some of it's just from the ridiculousness of the situations, but a lot of it is also from her inserting herself into their intensity without realizing what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else you want to talk about with those characters, the three we've kind of met so far?
No.
I would like to talk about one more character who's kind of a more unnamed sort of entity, and that is the narrator. Because in this show, the narrator serves a pretty important role in that the kind of premise for the show is that these two characters are in a battle together, quote unquote. But this battle is never explicitly stated by the characters. They each kind of individually acknowledge that they would like the other person to admit their feelings, but they never say, like, I'm winning this fight, and stuff like that. Instead, it's the narrator who's kind of driving all of that tension.
Yeah, you had kind of told me before it sounded like a WWE announcer.
Yes, yeah, very much. It definitely comes across as like color commentary to me because I don't know, at the end of every vignette, the narrator is announcing this person won because they got, they pulled this move on the other person and stuff like that.
Yeah, but winning doesn't always seem to indicate somebody's acknowledged their feelings. It's just they got the upper hand in this scheme.
Or sometimes just something really sweet happens, like it's a really nice episode where everyone just gets along and everyone wins in those.
Yeah. I think the narrator really works in this circumstance because sometimes with anime you get characters who give a lot of exposition for no reason, and then you sit there and you're like, nobody talks like this. People don't just sit there and explain every single part of their lives and everything that they're thinking out loud when nobody else is actually listening.
Well, says you.
Okay, I don't. Maybe you should get that checked out. But the narrator really does that for us in a way that we kind of get put in the position of the narrator, and I think that makes it really enjoyable in a way that can sometimes be a little cringy when you're watching High School Romance, and so
True.
This, I think, makes it you kind of get that vicarious, are they? Aren't they? I don't know. Oh my gosh, what is happening? And the narrator's joining you in that, and I think that works for the show.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's especially kind of comparable to wrestling because you wouldn't normally see in a wrestling session that all the characters would just get up into the ring and start blabbing at each other for 30 minutes. They do some of that, but eventually there's going to be an actual fight that has to happen. And when the fight is happening, the narrator is the color commentator is the one who's having to add in the kind of sitcom elements and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that brings to life a lot of the more day-to-day stuff that we see from them. Things like if you just saw it presented to you, you probably wouldn't think much of what's happening, but because of the narrator, it kind of adds all that flavor to it that is oh, this is a much bigger deal than what's seen on the surface.
Yeah, right.
So usually this is where we also take a break for ads, but we're live, so we're not going to take a break.
Just gonna power through.
Yes. So this next kind of session, we talk about the animation quality, the character designs, production value of the show. So where do you want to start our conversation with that?
I think generally we kind of like to talk about character design stuff before going into the more kind of technical side of the animation production stuff. So I only had a few notes, and maybe we want to just kind of talk about the two main characters in Chika and how they appear in the show, what makes them interesting.
Yeah, if we want to start with Miyuki, this character design kind of confuses me because he sort of looks like a villain. Usually with
we'll be right back after this short break.
Male characters, if they're evil in some nature, they'll have something kind of under their eyes, usually bags or something. And this character has that. And so when I first saw him, I was thinking of, we recently watched Toradora, and that character also has really intense eyes, and that's kind of a center of his character design. And Miyuki reminds me of that. He has this weird intensity, but I think it's supposed to be from tiredness.
Right. So I think in Toradora they say it's something like he has family history with the Yakuza, and that's why people kind of see him and are afraid of him.
Yeah.
With Miyuki, it's actually that he's super popular because he studies all the time And so he looks tired. He looks super, super exhausted constantly.
But apparently still handsome enough to constantly get affection from lots of females at the school.
Right.
So Kaguya is kind of the opposite. Even her color scheme is totally opposite from Miyuki's, because he's very like pale, he has blonde hair, and she has this like dark black hair, red eyes, and she definitely looks evil.
For sure.
And they play that up on purpose. There are times when they intentionally make her look like she's possessed or that she's literally about to murder somebody.
Yeah, I specifically wrote down Kaguya looks just a little bit like there is a slight potential that she might turn out to be a serial killer.
I believe it.
She kind of reminds me of characters from certain like horror anime. I'm even thinking like the character from Blood Sea and stuff like that, who can have a really nice kind of, affable persona, but also when she glares at you, you are probably in trouble.
Yeah, and they point that out too. There's one episode that I think of, like, where she's wearing cat ears and everybody's like, she's so precious, look how cute she is. And then I think in the same episode but different vignette, she's like glaring at somebody and they're like, I'm going to die, she's going to kill me, I'm sure of this.
Yeah, not confirmed to be a yandere, but there's potential.
Maybe. I think Chika in this regard is the most anime out of these characters. Like, she has this long pink hair, she's very, very bubbly, and everything about the way that she's designed, she just looks like, anybody, if you say like, oh, do you know what anime looks like? It would be Chika. That's what she looks like.
Mm-hmm. That's all I wrote for Chika. She's got a bow tie in her hair that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's right up in the bangs. I was going to try and do it, but I couldn't figure out how.
Yeah, I don't know if there's some kind of magic clip behind there, but it doesn't really kind of physically work.
No. I think something that's important to note about the show, we kind of touched on it before, is that there's not a whole lot of scenery that goes on. Like, they're in this one room all the time. And so all of the animation that you see is driven by the character. So any action sequences, anything that is kind of moving is the characters. And I think that's really important to point out, because I think a lot of times shows rely on things happening outside of the characters to move the story forward or for the characters to react to. And the show kind of does the opposite. The characters are reacting because of what's happening within them and not because of what's happening outside of, in their background.
Right. And something I noticed kind of about the animation styles for the show is that they use various techniques to overemphasize things. One of the kind of focal points of the club room where they spend the majority of the show is a very, very large conference table with like benches on either side of it. And it's large on its own when you see it in proportion to the rest of the room. These benches hold like 5 people on each side, so it's a large table. But there are certain scenes where, to like overemphasize the distance between two characters, metaphorically, they will kind of extend that table to almost infinite lengths. So there's a scene where both characters desperately need some source of sugar at a particular time. And so they see a sweet bun on the table, and both of them try to leap for it. And despite the fact that the table is, maybe a few feet wide, it turns into an entire like battle sequence where they're rushing over the table and like crawling over each other and trying to reach that goal.
Yeah, and then Chika just grabs it.
Yes. Bringing kind of the viewer back to the reality that this table is like super tiny.
Yes.
And you could just reach out and pick up the sweet bun.
Yeah. I think they also do really fun stuff with the animation in the intro and outro. The intro is just really colorful, and I think the word you've used before is psychedelic.
A little bit, yeah.
Which I love. I think it adds a lot of playfulness to the show that shows like, okay, this is this is going to be like a comedy, this is going to be a lot of fun. And even though the lyrics are saying love is war, you can see that there's this playfulness with it that is not so intimidating.
Right. But in that same intro, all of the characters are holding weapons of various kinds and pointing them at each other.
I mean, it is war.
So yeah, in the intro stuff, there's like kind of silhouettes of the characters will get stretched across the screen, specifically the two main characters. And in each kind of iteration of the character, you'll see them holding like a knife or some medieval like morning star or a gun.
Mm-hmm. Which is unusual how much guns are shown in the intro, because guns aren't like very common in Japan, at least not with, high school students and
not legally.
Yeah. But they do show it a lot in that intro.
Yeah, and obviously they don't use those like in the actual show. It's just kind of to even further push the metaphor of the battle happening.
Yeah. I think you also wanted to talk about some of the outros.
I do. I think the kind of this show, we've seen several different outro animations, actually. One of them is just kind of like a straightforward, it shows the characters and they're like in a biplane and they're flying around, and I don't quite understand it.
It's if the show took place in a fantasy world.
Yeah, right.
She sprouts wings, the standard anime stuff.
But the other one that I want to talk about, which showed up in one episode kind of randomly, and if you've been on the internet and looked at anything anime related in the last year, you might have seen this. It is just a kind of plain scene where you see Chika alone in the club room and a weird kind of J-pop song starts playing, and she gets up and she starts dancing, except that it's rotoscoped.
Which we've seen before. We've had one show that we watched, Tribe Cool Crew, that was a lot of rotoscope.
Yeah,
that was not good.
It was like a combo of rotoscoping and mocap stuff. It was also a much lower budget kind of show for kids.
Yes.
So this one is kind of strange because it does come up very suddenly, and it's very different than the animation style for the rest of the series.
Yeah, it was, while it was still very good, it was kind of hard for me to watch because it just doesn't look like traditional anime, but it doesn't look like, we've talked before in shows about how when CGI or something suddenly comes in, you're like, oh gosh, like that didn't blend well at all. This does blend really well, but that's what's weird about it, is because it's like, this shouldn't look right, but it does, and so now it looks wrong because it actually looks good.
Yeah, it's the simplest things, like when she is moving around, her clothing, I don't know why I said that, very weird. Her clothing will like move extremely naturally, like kind of in a disturbing way.
Yes.
And same with like her hair and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's pleasant to watch, but if you watch a lot of anime, it'll just be a little jarring.
Yeah. I think if I had anything else to say about production kind of elements, because they are so limited in the scope of the environments of where this show takes place, they tend to use a lot of post-processing kind of stuff and weird kind of different anime techniques to render scenes. One that I noted was that quite frequently they'll use like a VHS sort of filter on top of the scenes. And I can't really discern any reason that they've done so. It kind of just seems like they found a VHS plug-in and were like, this thing is cool, let's put it on everything.
I mean, that happens.
And then the only other thing, I guess, would be that for the intro animation, they do this thing that I'm not a huge fan of, but it's really popular in this kind of anime series, and that is short looped sequences in time to a music track.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when you're watching it, but sometimes when you're watching Crunchyroll or Verve, you're like, is this buffering or is this intentional? I'm not sure. And this kind of felt like that, where I was like, wait, this just happened 3 times. Is this supposed to happen? I'm not. Oh, okay, it's intentional.
Yeah.
So our final kind of section that we talk about is some of the general thoughts that don't necessarily fit into like our previous conversations. And so I kind of want to hear what maybe you liked or what you disliked about the show.
Yeah, I think something that works really well in this show is the way that they have broken up the vignettes between each episode. It allows for some variation in the things that they're doing, but still able to focus in on that one room where most of this stuff takes place. And that opens up the field for some really funny kind of possibilities. I wanted to talk a little bit about one specific moment that I think we both enjoyed. There's one part of the show where they are trying to play a word game, and it is a word game where somebody decides a word for you. So like I would pick a word for Kayla, and I would put it on a piece of paper, and she would hold it above her forehead, and she's not allowed to know what word it is. And the goal is to try to goad the person into saying it so that they lose.
Right. It's something that you think that they would normally say in their day-to-day conversation.
And in this particular time that they're playing the game, Miyaki wants to lose because the consequence is that two losers have to go shopping together. So he would get his chance for Kaguya and Miyaki to go shopping.
So what he ends up doing is putting a phrase that he thinks Chika would never say.
Which is, check it out. And this is unfortunate because as soon as Chika starts playing the game, we realize that she has adopted an alternate persona in which she tries to throw people off the trail so that she won't lose the game, which is that she's a rapper.
Yes.
And so as soon as she starts rapping and adding yo to every sentence that she speaks, the main character who gave her the word is freaking out because she might definitely say check it out at some point.
Yep.
So I think moments like these are just really interesting. Chika especially is so good as a character at subverting your expectations and the main character's expectations kind of simultaneously.
Yeah, in that episode, you get to see a lot of her because of how much she manipulates both of them into winning. It's fantastic.
Yeah, she utterly destroys them in this game, and you kind of find out how ruthless she is as a person, despite how bubbly and nice she seems.
We also see that a little bit in other places where she suddenly, like, she gives an idea for something they should do for their summer vacation, and it's basically like, we should go to this haunted cemetery. Wouldn't that be amazing? And you're like, what?
Yeah, because I thought Kaguya was the killer.
Yes. My thoughts are kind of in the same vein, but I kind of wanted to focus on the fact that they are constantly in this one room, with very few exceptions. The majority of their relationship seems to take place in this room, and so I like the idea that this show presents itself as, this is a show about these two characters and their romance, and the fact that they want to confess their feelings for each other, but they want the other one to say it first. And that's all this show presents you. You don't see them outside of this room because that's not where their romance is happening, because either they're not in classes together or they're not studying together or whatever. And so the show is saying, this is what's important. It's this romance. And I think in that way, the room kind of gets personified as a character, because it's saying, this is the focus. This is the character, is the romance, because we don't really care about Kaguya's life outside of the room or Miyuki's, academic, studying habits or anything like that. We only care about the romance. And so I think that's great, because some shows, you have the stereotypical, we're going to have the beach episode. We're going to all go to the spa. And this show doesn't really seem to do that, because their lives outside of this romance don't seem to matter to this show.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a pretty interesting mechanic, and I think if I had any kind of general thoughts going away from this show that are more on the negative side, it's not even that I have a complaint about it. I just am kind of concerned that the formula won't stick up through, 24 episodes. And now with a second season on its way, how long is that going to work? Of this, one room, 3 characters, kind of doing similar things every vignette.
Well, we do know that some characters are going to be added in because we've seen them in the intro. So there's a few scenes where you see a bunch of random characters and they have to come up at some point. What I would love to see is them take this idea that the romance is kind of focused in this room, and then as the romance, assumingly, blossoms, that it would expand out, and then it would naturally come out of that, like as their romance kind of spills out from the student council room, that we would then see them in more and more places. And I think that could be a really great way to let the show grow more naturally.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, at the end of our show, we always ask the same question. Now, having watched 4 episodes of Kaguya-sama, Love is War, Kayla, would you watch more of this?
I would because I tend to be a very character-driven kind of anime watcher. So if I really get into the characters, then I'm pretty well invested. And I like these characters. I think they're fun. And I just want to know. Apparently they won't do it this season, but maybe some season somebody will win, and I'll get to see who it is.
We'll see. I would agree. I'm also going to say yes on this one. This one I'd actually had on our Verve watch list for several months. And because we do this podcast, we pretty much don't have free time to watch what we actually want to watch.
It's pretty rare.
We pretty much just watch whatever the dice tell us to watch.
Yes. And then a backlog of...
and then all the previous shows we've said yes to. There aren't that many.
No.
But this is one that I had heard a lot about, and it kind of seemed like something I'd be interested in. And getting into these 4 episodes, I would definitely keep giving it a chance, and hopefully it does nail the formula for a while.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up our second live episode, which is exciting.
Yay.
If you want to learn more about our show, you can visit our website at animonday.moe. That's animonday.moe. You can send us questions and comments to AniMondayCast. You can find us on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of those, and our username is AniMondayCast.
Yeah, and thanks to Crunchyroll for all of the anime they provide, and for the random button, which produces these wonderful and wonderfully terrible results. If you want to follow along with us each week, you can have a link to the current title on our website and social media once you get back to land and have internet.
Yes.
And you can find these shows on Crunchyroll or Verve. We really like Verve because it's got all of Crunchyroll.
Yeah.
It's also got the long since left alone My Brother and Me show. Rip CISO, I guess.
Yes.
And a lot of other kind of nerdy fun stuff all in one package.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
And all the 90s cartoons you could ever want.
Oh yeah, a lot of Nick 90s cartoons too. Thanks also to C2A for providing the intro and outro music for our show. Those come from the Senpai EPs, which are available on his Bandcamp and other streaming services.
So normally the way that we do the next roll is we would just have a laptop and connect to the internet and hit the random button, but we knew we weren't going to have internet on the boat. So I painstakingly rolled 20 times on Crunchyroll and picked 20 shows, and Colin's going to roll a dice.
We have RPG dice here because we're on a nerd boat.
Yes. So Colin will roll the dice, and whatever number he picks, that'll be the show that we end up watching.
After she produced this list, I did go through it and verify we haven't seen any of these, and they're all a reasonable length because we don't usually do super short form 4-minute episodes. And I can tell you for sure that there is only one on this list that I know that is decent. There are a lot I know that are not good.
And there's some we don't know at all.
And many that I've never heard of.
All right.
Here we go. Random button, random roll thing. 3, 2, 1.
What's the number?
It is a 10.
Good luck.
Oh, God. Okay, we are going to watch... This is the one that I do know.
Okay.
We're going to be watching Shin Sakai Yori from the New World.
Okay. And the first episode is called The Season of New Leaves.
All right.
I have no idea what the show is. I usually don't.
I made it through like 10 episodes.
Oh, okay. Well,
I've seen some of it before.
I only have to watch 4, so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we said we would do, if we still have time, we would do a little Q&A.
Yeah.
If we wanted to, if people had questions.
We do have some time.
Questions? Anyone? It doesn't have to be about this. It could also just be about our podcast. That's okay too.
Yeah. We really appreciate everyone coming out. I hope you had some fun. Obviously, we've got some business cards with us too if you want to take something home.
Yeah.
But as soon as you got internet, check it out at AniMonday.moe.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.